Tarek Delancey had never flown solo before. At 12, he was old enough to manage the flight by himself, or so the airline's policy and his dad's confidence suggested. Still, his palms were a bit sweaty as he held onto his boarding pass, the straps of his backpack digging into his shoulders. But none of that mattered. Inside the bag were all the things he needed: snacks, a sketch pad, headphones, and a folded letter from his mom. "Look out the window and picture the mountains," she had written. "It'll feel like you're flying over a painting." Tarek kept reading that line over and over again. Seattle wasn't home, but it was where he was headed for a 2-week robotics camp his dad had helped sponsor. He was the only kid from his middle school attending, and the pride on his mom's face when they dropped him off that morning still lingered in his mind. Tarek followed all the steps, checked in early, got his gate information, and waited in line. Everyone ahead of him passed through smoothly, but when it was his turn, something shifted. The gate agent stood there in a navy blazer, red lipstick that didn't match her tone, and an air of superiority that made her seem more important than the job itself. Her name tag read Colleen Dresner. She glanced at him, but not at his boarding pass. "Are you lost?" she asked. "No," Tarek replied, voice steady. "I'm boarding for Flight 262 to Seattle." Instead of scanning his boarding pass, she tilted her head and asked, "Where are your parents?" "I'm flying alone," Tarek said, pulling out the printed confirmation. "My dad already boarded earlier." She sighed, one of those exaggerated slow sighs that spoke louder than words. "We don't just let kids wander up here by themselves," she said, folding her arms. "I'm not wandering," Tarek said, holding his ticket out again. "It's right here." But instead of taking the pass, she grabbed the paper with 2 fingers, scanned it briefly, and then, without any warning, ripped it straight down the middle. Tarek's mouth opened, but no words came out. He stared at the 2 torn halves in her hands, unable to process what had just happened. "There," she said flatly. "Now you'll wait here until we figure out who you really are. I've seen enough fake passes in my career to know when something doesn't add up." The room seemed to tilt for a moment. Passengers behind him exchanged confused glances, but no one said a word. Not a single person stepped forward to defend him. "I didn't do anything," Tarek muttered, his voice shaking. "You're being disruptive," Colleen snapped. "Don't make this harder on yourself." Disruptive. That word echoed in his mind as he looked around the gate. The passengers, the staff, even the security officer leaning against the wall, they all seemed to ignore him, as if he was a problem they didn't want to address. Colleen waved at another flight attendant, a younger guy with a headset. "Can you call TSA? We might have a situation." That's when the fear began to crawl in. Tarek wasn't scared of flying. He was scared of being singled out, humiliated in front of strangers when he had done nothing wrong. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a dismissal. He clutched his mom's letter tightly in his jacket pocket, but didn't pull it out. The silence around him felt crushing. The younger flight attendant, Ryan, looked uncomfortable. His name tag said Ryan, and he shifted from foot to foot like he wanted to speak up but wasn't sure if he should. Meanwhile, Colleen stood with her arms crossed, acting like she had prevented a major security issue instead of humiliating a 12-year-old. Tarek tried again. "Ma'am, if you just scan my name, my dad's already on the plane. His name is Benson Delancey." For a brief moment, Colleen's expression flickered with recognition, but she quickly masked it. "I don't care whose name you throw around," she said dismissively. "I've been doing this job 20 years. I know when something smells off." "I didn't lie about anything," Tarek said, his voice rising with frustration. "You're being combative now," Colleen snapped. "You want to make this worse?" Tarek remained silent. Not because he didn't have words, but because he didn't want to give her any more ammunition to twist. The TSA officer finally arrived, a stocky man in his 50s, chewing gum, wearing mirrored sunglasses indoors. He looked at Tarek, then at Colleen. "What's going on?" "Possible fake ticket," Colleen said. "Claims he's flying alone, doesn't have proper ID, getting smart with staff." The officer raised an eyebrow at Tarek. "You got a guardian here?" "My dad's on the plane already," Tarek said. The officer pulled out a tablet and typed for a few seconds. "We've got a Delancey on the manifest," he said. "Two of them, actually. Looks like Benson Delancey checked in about 30 minutes ago, and the minor was confirmed for unaccompanied minor service." Colleen was confused. "Unaccompanied minor?" "The system's clean," the officer replied bluntly. "He's legit." Colleen's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. She just stood there, her arms still crossed as though the facts were disrespecting her opinion. The TSA officer turned to Tarek. "You all right, kid?" Tarek nodded, though he wasn't really. He wasn't about to tell this guy how shaken he felt. "Looks like someone jumped the gun," the officer muttered. Just as the tension seemed to ease, a voice called out from behind the security barrier. Calm, direct, and unmistakably in control. "Is there a reason my son isn't on that plane?" Every head at the gate turned. It wasn't the booming voice or imposing figure that commanded attention. It was the calmness in Benson Delancey's presence. He didn't need broad shoulders or a booming voice. He walked with purpose, his chin steady, his eyes unwavering. He wasn't angry, just certain. "I stayed behind to observe," Benson said. "We've had staffing complaints on this route. I wanted to see it for myself." He looked over at Tarek, still clutching the torn ticket. "And it looks like I saw more than I expected." Colleen shifted uncomfortably on her heels. "I wasn't aware you were." "You weren't supposed to be," Benson interrupted politely, but firmly. Tarek stepped closer to his dad, finally breathing again. "She said I had a fake ticket and tore it up," he said. Benson didn't flinch. "Did you scan his name?" he asked Colleen. "Well, no, I didn't get that far," Colleen started. "Did you check the unaccompanied minor list?" Benson continued, his voice calm but pointed. "The tag on his backpack has a barcode that links to his manifest." Colleen stood frozen. "You didn't think," Benson said, his voice steady but unyielding. "You assumed." Ryan, the younger attendant, stepped in. "He followed all the rules. He even checked in with me at the front desk an hour ago. I verified his ID." Colleen glared at Ryan, but he didn't back down. "Then why was his ticket destroyed?" Benson asked. Colleen opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I'd like a supervisor at gate C12, Benson said, still calm but resolute. Ryan tapped his headset. "Already on it, sir." A woman sitting nearby, who had been quietly observing, stood up. "I saw him," she said. "He was polite, showed his pass, and didn't do anything wrong." Benson turned to her and nodded. "Thank you." Colleen looked smaller now, though she still stood tall. "I didn't know who he was," she said finally, grasping for an excuse. "That's the problem," Benson replied. "It shouldn't matter who he is." The supervisor arrived minutes later, and the situation began to unfold rapidly. Benson handled the conversation with ease, demanding accountability for the staff's failure to follow procedures. As Tarek rejoined his father, there was a sense that this moment wouldn't just end with a new boarding pass.